Welcome to Season 5, Episode 2 of the Overseas Famous Podcast. I'm here with volleyball legend, volleyball extraordinaire, and the voice of volleyball, the community voice of volleyball, Travis Mewhirter. Travis, thank you so much for joining us and talking about your experience, because I think the every volleyball person I know is just like the coolest, most chill, like adventurous person I know. And it's fun to kind of pick your brain because it's such a unique sport. It's so unique, your lifestyle, and we're excited to hear all about it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. You're not kidding. It's a sport for road dogs. I mean, we're adventurers, we're grinders. It's you think of professional sports and you're thinking pretty good paychecks and kind of luxury living. And beach volleyball, we're sleeping. I actually just got back from Yosemite, slept in a tent for 4 days, and that's more the norm, stuff like that. And we just it's so fun though, because I mean, as my buddy Eric Zahn used to say, good adversity. Those are the stories that you always remember when you're stuffing 6 people in a hotel room in Venice, and then you're just getting up the next morning playing snow volleyball, and then you're going over somewhere else and you're playing beach volleyball. It's a wild ride, man. It's so fun.
The snow volleyball is something we're going to get into because that's incredible. Yeah. But what is it about this profession that kind of lends itself to this adventurous side, this adventurous trait? Why is it that volleyball in general makes all these guys and girls like more of an adventurous people, willing to explore and do different things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially because I just published a book about 2 months ago, sort of on this very thing. It's called Kings of Summer, and it's on how beach volleyball went from this sort of like renegade rebel sport, and it was the first professional beach volleyball event was held in 76, and this company called Olympia Beer threw in $5,000, but the guys at the time, when you were playing beach volleyball, it was sort of a vote against the corporate 9-to-5. It's like, screw it, we're going to the beach all day, we're living this permanent vacation of just like sunshine, beaches, partying, we'll work like whatever odd jobs we have to do. So it's kind of an identity thing. And beach volleyball has gotten a little bit more professionalized since then. It's the most watched sport at every summer Olympic Games. So every 4 years, beach volleyball looks like this incredible, really professional sport. But really, when you think about beach volleyball players, it's not all that different from surfers and skateboarders and snowboarders and skiers, where you're just like, you know what? The office lifestyle isn't quite for me. It's tough to really pin down and tame a beach volleyball player. We're just like not fit. We're all like super ADD. We can't sit for long. Like we tried the 9-to-5s, it didn't work out. And so we just play beach, and we'll all complain about it. Be like, oh man, I'm working 3 or 4 jobs, but we love it. We love that grind. It's just, I think that beach volleyball attracts that certain type of person that you don't want to be stuck inside. You want to be outside. You want to be exhausted. You want to be in the sun, around the ocean with your friends. Then you want to do like 3 or 4 hours of coaching here and do a random little side gig there. Like a lot of people be dog walkers for WAG or Uber drivers. Or one of my buddies, Kame Shock, who is an Olympian for Canada, and now he plays for the US. He flips electric cars. It's like people, yeah, you're shaking your head. That's just totally normal. And people be like, oh man, that's a good idea. Like in the beach volleyball community. And most people hear that, they're like, what did you just say?
That is incredible. I think there's so many, I always compare it to the off season, like, playing a professional sport, playing pro basketball. I felt like the off season, you're like, okay, we made some money here, but now it's like, I'm still home, and I'm home for like 4 months or whatever, and you're working odds and ends and doing like lessons and things like that, and it's just such a unique lifestyle. But the volleyball just it speaks to me, because I do think there is, like you said, the skateboarding, and it's in that field where you can just pack up, and like you said, you're in Yosemite, living in a tent. That's an incredible life, and you're not ready for that. You don't want to do that 9-to-5 lifestyle. And you have something. Your story is so unique, by the way. I mean, for the people listening, Trav, you never really, you didn't play volleyball in college, and then you end up going to California and you become a pro, and now you built this entire empire. So how do you go from like not really involved in volleyball to suddenly being like the pro volleyball and the voice of volleyball?
Yeah, man, it's been a wild ride. And my brothers, dude, and my friends from home, they crack up at it because I grew up in this sort of rural farm town in Maryland, about 30 minutes northwest of Baltimore, and there's no volleyball to speak of anywhere. So we played every sport under the sun. I mean, I played golf, basketball, baseball, soccer. I swam in college. I played club basketball in college, and then I was a journalism major, and so I've been a writer my entire life, which is super fortunate. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do for as long as I can remember, but I just got tired of snow in Maryland. Ended up, I remember one night, man, I was like under the influence at my buddy's house in Maryland, and I couldn't drive home. I was like, man, I'm tired of the snow. Like, we had a record snowfall that year. We had like 88 inches of snow. And so I just applied, went on journalismjobs.com, applied for every job south of Virginia. That was my rule. I can't take anything. So I narrowed it down to 2 job offers, one in North Carolina, one in Florida. Ended up taking the one in Florida. And in Northwest Florida, like, there's nothing else to do but play beach volleyball because all the bars are on the beaches and they all have courts with lights. And so they would be playing beach volleyball till like 2 a.m. And so I would just like walk to the bar and just like see. The only people I knew, all my friends, were beach volleyball players. So like, hey, you want to play 4s or 6s or whatever? But there's this one guy who named Judd Smith, and he was a pro. And he was like, let me take you under your wing. Like, you look athletic, you're terrible. I can try to help you out, you know? And so I just loved it because I like the novelty of it. I'd played all these different sports and I had this athletic skill set, but I had nothing athletic to do. I was 24 at the time. And so I was kind of restless, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm learning a new skill. It's pretty complex. It's outside. It's fun. It's a great community. And I just got obsessed with it. And so I started writing about it. My first assignment for the newspaper, actually, the Northwest Florida Daily News, was to write about this event called FUDS, which is this huge 4s tournament that's become like kind of an annual stop. It's one of my favorite tournaments in the world. I mean, you get like probably close to 50,000 people that go into Northwest Florida for this tournament. And that was my first newspaper. So I was like, what sport is this? I need more of this in my life. And man, ever since then, it's just taken off. And I've been fortunate enough where like the confluence of my skill sets of being athletic and also being a writer is something that hasn't happened in the sport of beach volleyball. And so when I started writing about it, just on a free little WordPress site I made, I got picked up by 2 magazines right away. And then me and my buddy Triborn, we made this podcast. And ever since then, it's just exploded. And now here I am. Beach volleyball is literally the only thing I've done for the last 4 years.
That is wild. Just the journey. And it's funny because I'm sitting, Eric's on, and we'll talk about Eric, but Brian's on, Eric's brother, and I are good friends. And we were honestly sitting outside the other day, and he's like tossing me the volleyball, and I'm like, he's doing like he's like boom, boom, and put it in, and I'm like fucking it up nonstop. Like, it's like all over the place. He's like, you suck at volleyball. I was like, dude, I've never played volleyball. I was like, I'm athletic, but I don't know. Like, it's like my arm. I was like, I'm too tall. He's like, no, that's not a thing. I was like, everything's jamming me up. So it's funny to kind of hear how when you can, take that athleticism and harness it in the correct way, and you really make something. And it's your story is so unique and cool. And when he was telling me about this, I was like, I can't believe that, you went through this and really, became who you are. And he's always said, he's like, it's crazy. And he laughs. He's just like, there's, a lot of people will just, rent a van and just drive from like New Jersey to California with no place to live. I mean, that's obviously, very close to his heart. And It's crazy because I always feel like if you're chasing a dream, I always say with overseas basketball, like if you're chasing a dream, you're willing to do whatever it takes to make it. And even if it's an uncomfortable journey, like you were saying, you can still, keep pushing, even if you're hopping a van and just go cross country with nothing and just be like, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. And I mean, so much of this sport, I think about this all the time. It really just sort of kind of depends on what your definition of wealthy is, in terms of, because Seneca, I'm a big reader of Ryan Holiday, who runs the Daily Stoic. And Seneca has this thing where, wealthy isn't having in excess, it's of wanting more. And so if you don't want anything more, like I get to wake up every day and I walk down to the beach and take a 20-minute walk. And then I write about beach volleyball and I read, and then I get to play beach volleyball. And then at night I'll go hang out with Try and we'll podcast or whatever. and I'm not making as much as, Mike Trout or Shohei Ohtani or LeBron James, but like I get to wake up and there's literally nothing more that I want in my life. And that's how a lot of beach volleyball players are, is that we are a group that has very little wants. We just want a lifestyle that lets us play beach volleyball all day. And my brothers cannot understand it, because my little brother, he's married. He has a beautiful little girl, and he's like, bro, how are you going to feed a family? I'm like, well, right now I don't have to. And so
we're good.
I'm really content. And so with overseas basketball players, I know it's a grind. Like I've read a ton of stories on, Stephon Marbury when he was playing in China, and Allen Iverson when he was out there, and all these kind of guys who come into the G League and go to the NBA, and they're like, yeah, it's such a grind. But you look at it, and that's exactly what they want to be doing. Yeah. And so, yeah, sometimes it can be a little tiring, but you look at it and you're like, what an incredibly blessed life we get to live, where our life is, what people do for vacation.
Yeah. And I always say, like, it's hard to shut the grind off. Even when I got done playing, I still, like, for no reason. You were grinding and making things difficult on yourself for no reason, because you were so used to just continuing and pushing. And like you said, that lifestyle where you can be happy, and that's the most important thing. And we talk about, a lot of the things with volleyball in the community, nutrition, exercise, taking care of yourself, taking care of others. Those are huge facets of volleyball, and it's a huge facet of mental health in general for athletes. And a lot of athletes look past that because you're always wanting the more. And when you can kind of focus on what you have and focus on the now, it definitely helps, you keep grounded and, be a more successful human being.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I love sports where a lot like beach volleyball, where it's such a community driven sport, because it's really small. It's a really niche sport. And so like last night, my wife and I, we had over Andy Benish and Deanna Kraft. Andy won, I think, 3 AVPs this year. Deanna's like in the running for rookie of the year. We had my buddy Evan Corey. Like, these are my rivals, that I'm playing against all the time. I played Evan like 5 times this year, and I've gotten dinner with him twice this week. Me and Andy hang out all the time. We go golfing. And so it's just like this great little community where we know that everyone's sort of struggling a little bit in one way or other. And so everyone's like trying to prop up another to a certain extent. Once you get to those top big dogs, they're fine. Like, they're living pretty great lifestyles, and they're not really helping, the number 2 and 3 team try to catch them. But everyone else, it's sort of that mid to lower tier professional level. Everyone's trying to help out everyone else to get a little bit better, or just trying to figure out how can we get the sport where a lot more people can enjoy it and live it. I'm sure that overseas basketball has probably had a similar thing going on.
Yeah, 100%. You're constantly, you have a group, and there's so many of the same faces that you'll see. So a guy that you played with the next year, because it's like the Yahtzee, every year it's just all rolled back together and thrown back out. So a guy who was your teammate this year is now your opponent next year, and then could be in a different league next year, and you're playing him in EuroLeague. It's just, everything's wild, but you have that community where, especially as that athlete, you're all in it together, especially being in a different country. You're far away from home. That's like normal. That's your normal. And just having that other guy, maybe he lives, we had a team when I was in Estonia, the others 2 teams in town, and we kind of hung out with the other team because they were Americans, we were Americans, and we play them and compete. But at the same time, you're like, well, there's like 4 Americans in this entire city. Like, we're going to find those 4 Americans and all get together. So I 100% agree that you kind of develop those bonds with, your rivals and stuff like that.
And that's one of the funniest parts about going overseas. It's hilarious where, any little problems you might have with each other in the US, they're gone. When you're overseas, you're like, you speak English, you're my guy. Like, we're boys now. And it doesn't even matter. Like, they could be from the Czech Republic, from the Netherlands, from the US. You're like, yeah, you speak a lick of English, I'm hanging on to you, buddy. Like, we're together now.
It's so needed. I feel like most places are pretty Americanized, but I do think there's that, we're getting that stigma where people come over and they're like expecting Americans going over and expecting everyone to understand English. They're going to be like, No, nope, nope. Like they're gonna make you speak the language, even if they speak English. And we're like, no, we're not playing this game. Like you're here, you speak my language.
And I love that because
Yeah,
in
same.
I speak sort of like first grade level Portuguese because
Okay,
a lot of our coaches are Brazilian, and so like
nice.
the last couple of years I've just been picking up phrases enough to get around and have a conversation with them. And so like if their parents or family come in town, I can say hi, how are you, and they're like, oh my god, it's super fun. And so when we went to Brazil though, they don't speak English a whole lot. They might in Rio, but we were in this town called Itapema, which is sort of like a Brazilian tourist town, like kind of like the Florida Keys would be for the U.S.
Yep.
And so we were there and there was no English being spoken. And so I was like, all the Americans were like, hey man, can you ask for this? Or can you get directions or like get a restaurant or how can we order? It's pretty fun. I love it when we go places where they don't speak English and they're like, nah, man, like you gotta ask us for coffee in Italian or French or wherever we may be. Just because it forces you to get creative and it forces you to like build a relationship with someone and you can like joke about it. And I don't know. I love that stuff.
I'm the same way. We went in the like Alsatian wine route, and once it was like in like off of Mulhouse, France, and like you're kind of outside the city where people weren't really speaking, and I love that. I love the fact that you would go in and kind of like have to piece together a conversation and piece together something, and you're kind of lost, but at the same time, like you're safe lost. And I like that where it's like, okay, well, nothing crazy is going to happen. I'm in a place where I'm familiar with, but at the same time, no one speaks English, so I have to figure it out. And it's like almost like you're like in an escape the room every single time, where you just slowly have to kind of put together the pieces and get from point A to point B.
Yeah, and I think for one, I think it's sort of a measure of respect when you go to a place and you can at least say hi, how are you, thank you, something in their language, just to acknowledge that you're trying.
Yep.
And I think that I love language. Just, I mean, as a writer, like I read like a book or two a week. I just love words, languages, whatever. And I think they're so fun to learn. And I think that if you really want to understand the culture, I mean, there's two things that you have to learn about it. It's one, it's language, and two, it's food. I think they speak so much to its culture and you learn so much about it. Just like the phrases that they have and the little axioms and maxims. I think that like you can learn so much about a country just from learning just bits and pieces of its language.
I love that. I mean, there's so many people in this world who haven't traveled. I think it's something you have to do before you die. And you have to go to another place, a place that you're unfamiliar with, a place that doesn't speak your language, and just explore. And it shows you, like you said, it shows a lot about that culture. It shows a lot about who you are as a person too, like how you're willing to adapt and, not be scared. And, it's just, there's nothing better. I was so weird. I like walked away from traveling for a while when I got done playing, because you know how it is. Like one day I was in Estonia, the next day I'm in Lithuania, the next day I'm in Latvia, the next day you're in Switzerland. Like and then I'm back home and I'm back over here. And I was like, I was never settled. So when I finally kind of got settled, I was like, all right, I'm going to cut the traveling for a while. But now that bug is coming back and I just want to go. Like, I want to go explore again. But now it's like the same thing. Like I have, with kids and stuff, you can't be like, all right, I'm going to, Holland for a week. And like, no, you're not. You have soccer. I'm like, all right, cool.
Yeah. And I think, man, traveling it's so important, and I talk about all the time that, if you're like a US taxpayer, I think that you should get like a week-long like paid vacation somewhere shitty in the world. Just so you come back to the United States. And like, I think the biggest thing about traveling, you're really grateful for what you have.
Oh, 100%.
I played a handful of tournaments in China, and man, every time I go there and I come back, I'm like, these toilets flush, or like there's no one. Like a woman took a shit in the middle of the street in China. And I was there and I'm like, man, and that's not too far off from what we see in San Francisco sometimes out here. But man, you come back and you are so grateful. And I spent a week in Cuba this year and it was wild, man. I've never seen anything like that in terms of, I mean, like you have control over nothing. Those guys and like all the cars, it's cool. And it's cool in kind of a sinister way. Like the cars are all from the 40s and 50s because they can't get new ones. Like they can't get new parts and stuff. And so you should see these drivers are so careful because if they break a part of one of these ancient cars, like you can't really fix it. And so these drivers are really careful and everyone is talking about how bad they want to go to the US. And what the most fascinating thing, man, was we get there And so the Cuban peso is their currency, but they also accept euros and the Canadian dollar because it's a big vacation spot for Canadians.
Okay.
They don't accept US dollars anyway, because we've had the embargo there since, I want to say, like the 60s.
Hmm.
But what it's created is this black market where, like, our cab driver was like, "Hey, have you exchanged your euros or US dollars?" We said, "No, they don't take them." He goes, "Oh, I'll take them." And I was like, "Oh, well, what's the exchange rate?" And he's like, "Well, you were getting what, 25 to 1 at the bank?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'll give you 75 to 1." And I was like, "That sounds like a pretty good deal. I'll take that." So we get to the hotel that we were staying at for this tournament, and Americans weren't at the time, were not allowed to go there unless you were playing. And
Okay.
so we're like, it was kind of strange being one of the only Americans on the entire island. But so we get to the hotel, and a waiter comes up to us and they're like, "Hey, do you have American dollars?" We said, "Yeah, we have a few left." And he goes, "Well, what, have you exchanged them before?" We said, "Yeah." And he asked for the rate. We said 75 to 1. He goes, "Oh, I'll give you 125." And so the Cuban peso has been so inflated that it's useless. It's not accepted even in Cuba. And so, like, all these guys are just trying to get rid of it. So, like, the cab drivers will accept it from other Cuban people, and then
Uh-huh.
they take that, and then they exchange it with tourists to get American dollars and euros and Canadian dollars, where they can go to grocery stores and buy stuff. And you come back to the United States and you're like, "Oh my gosh," like, you're so grateful for
Yeah.
everything. And man, our cab driver, he drove us by his house, and he was like, probably about the size of I live in a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, 2 bath place. It's just me and my wife. And it's like, I don't know, 800 square feet. It's big enough for us, but it's not big. So this guy has a place that's smaller than ours: 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 1 kitchen, for him and his wife, his daughter, his mom, his dad, his sister, and her boyfriend. And he was like, "We're one of the wealthiest people in our neighborhood." It's like, and I think that's why travel is so important, man. You come back, like, you're
Yep.
so grateful for what you have, and you see what other cultures appreciate. And I mean, we just have it so good in the United States. I mean, even everyone's talking about right now, you know, what is a sad state the country's in. You're like, even, I mean, the sad state of the US is remarkable living.
Yeah, it's better than a whole lot of places that I've been. And you're right, like those little tiny things that people don't think about. And I always get mad when, like, people are yelling about this and that and that and stuff, and they're like, "Have you ever left your, like, town? Like, have you ever been and explored
Yeah.
and been and seen this world and seen what it is and seen, what else is out there?" And I feel like that's what, like you said, if you, in order to get like a Twitter account, I feel like you need to, the same thing. You need to take that week vacation to like a shitty place, and then it's like
Yes.
when you come back, they're like, "Okay, here's your username. Now you can say whatever the fuck you want." But
Yeah.
before that, you need to kind of, you need to see before you're just sitting there spouting off
Yeah.
whatever you're saying.
And that's what I mean. So like I said, I grew up in this pretty conservative, really traditional little farm town in Maryland that, I mean, is like stuck in the 70s. The population's, I think, risen by 33 people since like
Wow,
2000. So it's
that's
like, it's
crazy.
generational. Like, no one goes and no one leaves. It's just,
Yeah.
your kids have kids here, and then their kids, and so no one's left the country. Like, none of my friends have really left the country except for, like, Aruba or Puerto Rico or somewhere
Yeah.
like really touristy. So they haven't really left and seen something. And I played a tournament in Qatar, and my older brother's like, "Well, did you feel threatened, like, everywhere you went? Isn't Qatar super dangerous?" Like, no. Like, one, Qatar's one of the wealthiest countries in the world per capita, and like, these are super nice people. And it's just like the governments of a lot of these places will just cast this enormous shadow over millions of, like, beautiful, amazing people.
Yep.
Everyone I've met, everywhere I've gone in the world, no matter, like, when I was in Russia, and everyone, all the Russians I met were awesome,
Yeah.
and then everyone's like, "Well, it's Russia. Like, they're bombing Ukraine." I'm like, "They're not bombing Ukraine. Like, their dickhead dictator is."
It's not Stranger Things, like it's not like that where you're getting sent to a Russian prison.
Right.
But kind of the talking in terms of traveling and stuff, what do you think are the biggest challenges you face or that players face on the tour?
I mean, financial, because a lot of sports are, even indoor volleyball, your travel is covered by either your federation or the club that you're playing for. With beach volleyball, I mean, it's totally independent. You're traveling on your own dime. You're eating on your own dime. You're gambling on yourself, because to start on the world tour in beach volleyball, you have to play in qualifiers. And these are single elimination events where, I mean, if you get a tough draw and you play a team, I mean, a lot of the teams in qualifiers have been in the Olympics, you know, so you're going to play an Olympic team in the qualifier. Like last year when I went to Russia, I had to play Kame Schock and Theo Brunner, who are currently our number one ranked team in the country. Wow. And number one ranked team in the United States. I played them in the first round of the qualifier. So you go all the way to Russia, right? You're flying there. And I had been in Bulgaria for a few weeks. So you're going from Bulgaria to Russia, which is not a short or cheap trip. You're paying for your own hotel there. COVID was a nightmare trying to travel from country to country, especially once they started doing like QR codes and vaccine stuff, and every country had different rules. So the last couple of years, that's been the most difficult part. But so you're gambling on yourself with a lot of money to play phenomenal teams. And in Russia, I ended up beating Kame and Theo, but then we played Argentina in the second round. Well, that Argentinian team also played in the Tokyo Olympics. So I played back-to-back Olympians. We went to 3 with Argentina and lost. And then they played this German team in the third round. And then they ended up moving on into the main draw. And that's just to move into the main draw where you're splitting like $1,000 if you lose. So you're doing a lot of work. I mean, you have to win and win and win just to break even. And then you have to win some more to start making some money. so it's the financial part and the just pulling the trigger and hitting buy for these flights and gambling on yourself. And you're like, you know, if we get a tough draw, I'm going to be out $2,000. And then I can't play in this tournament and that tournament because I need to get some money back to go fly to another one where I need to gamble on myself.
Is there like, you know, I was like actually thinking, I was like, is there like some kind of, you know, like almost, what do they call it? Like almost like underground, you know, making bets, doing like beach volleyball, just being like, all right, let me try to sucker some people into making some money or anything like that? Or is that like a hustle? Does that ever happen in the beach volleyball circuit where you're kind of like hustling around to make some money?
There's, I mean, everyone coaches, which is like the hustling, but none of that except for there's this sort of dirt ball down in Texas and Mexico. But it's pretty dangerous sometimes because you get some pretty shady characters down there. But guys will get paid like $50,000 to go play these dirt ball things. But like you're playing for the mob, kind of. And so it's big money, and it is pretty risky because if you don't perform, you're in a tough spot. I've never played that, but a bunch of my buddies have. I mean, like weapons get drawn a lot and a couple people have been arrested. It's wild. I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole down there. Like that's a 30 for 30 waiting to happen.
That went down the wrong pipe. That's like, there you don't hear very much, and I feel like someone did a documentary, and I was talking to someone about a documentary for overseas basketball. They're like, we just did one on this weird thing that goes on in Mexico where people play like 3-on-3 tournaments in a similar way where it's like for the cartel, but you can make a shit ton of money, but there's like these really weird games. I was like, how have I gone through my entire career without ever hearing about it? Not that I would go, but it's just interesting that these little things are happening where there's little hustles are happening. And it's just like, all right, you know, shit could go real bad real quick, but could be worth your time. And that's a little frightening.
Well, that's so Mexico's number one team. I played them in an event on this island called Bon Air. They're really good, like phenomenal players, but they stopped playing for their federation and they just play dirt ball full time because they make bank. It's amazing.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
So you play like the volleyball circuit is incredible. There's like there's grass, there's beach, there's indoor, and there's snow, which is like the FIVB, which is crazy. So what, you know, take us through, like, what do you prefer? What is like the weirdest? And you had mentioned it earlier, transitioning from one to another. How difficult is that?
Yeah, so I pretty much exclusively play beach. I've played a little bit of grass. But when your muscles haven't been on a hard surface, when they've just been on this pillowy cushion that is sand, which is just made from God, basically, then you go to grass or something hard. Like I was sore for like 3 weeks. I was not right for a long time. And then it was really hard to adjust from a hard surface back to sand because you're not moving right. So I pretty much exclusively play beach. We did a 2-week trip to play this quirky, goofy little sport called snow volleyball. And we did that in these mountains in Austria and Italy. Coolest trip I've ever taken in my life. Terrible sport. No one should ever watch snow volleyball. Super fun. Like if you're on a ski slope and you see snow volleyball, it's like a tailgate sport, kind of like, you know, cornhole is really fun, but you're never going to watch cornhole. That's like, it's really fun to play. It's one of the sports that's super fun to play, but watching it, you're like, this is so unathletic because you're just like sliding around on snow. But man, it was an absolute blast. And we got to see like the most beautiful mountains in Austria. We stayed in cabins out there. Then we got to road trip across the country to Italy. And then we rented a car. Hilariously enough, we rented a stick shift. No one knew how to drive stick. So I learned how to drive stick driving cross country in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy. So snow volleyball, that's not really a thing anymore. I think that was a experiment that's now just pretty much European volleyball. They've been doing it for decades out there. But I don't think it'll be an Olympic sport. That was their original idea. I'd be shocked if it's an Olympic sport, especially with how bad Olympic ratings have been. And so the IOC is starting to cut down on all these weird little sports that keep popping up. So I just play exclusively beach, but for the people who do play grass and beach and flip back and forth, it blows my mind how they can do it. They're two totally different games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything has to adjust. It's like it's not, you know, obviously, but like, what was it called? Like the weird basketball where you were like jumping on trampolines and trying to dunk on people.
Slam ball.
Slam ball, that's it. Yeah, it's like playing slam ball and then hopping over and playing like an actual game. You're like, what in the world is happening? Your legs are gonna. My knees like hurt just thinking about that because they would like. I don't even jump on trampolines. Like I never did. That's always something that scared me because I felt like my knees would blow out, and I was like, that's all she wrote.
Yeah, because I mean, with grass volleyball, you know, the courts are a different size. There's different number of people on the court itself. The style of play is different. The ball's different. It's a completely different sport. I mean, the only consistency is that volleyball is in the name, and that you have 3 touches, and that's really it.
So, you know, obviously, I talked to Zahn. He's starting to, you know, this 1690, which is an initiative aimed to help impact or like increase overall mental awareness with volleyball players. His brother Eric, obviously, it's in his, you know, honor. What else do you think the volleyball community needs? I mean, we talk about mental health. What else does it need in terms of like how to make it, you know, a more efficient and successful product?
Oh man, what a good question. One, I love Brian Zahn. Love what he's doing. And so since Eric died, so I was living with Eric at the time. I was living in the garage, which was a remarkable experience. That was a single car garage, living in it. But we've been doing an Eric Zahn Award every year since he died in 2019. We just gave that out yesterday, actually, to Salila Tucker and Tegan Van Gunson. We do a decent job fundraising. I think we've given out about 30 grand to volleyball players the last 4 years. And we've given them out to, I want to say, around 15 players. So I love what Brian's doing, keeping it alive. And we're trying to keep the Zahn spirit alive as much as we can out here. And honestly, like what the volleyball community needs, I think, is a lot more personalities like Eric, where Eric, like, he didn't feel entitled to anything. I mean, that dude worked so freaking hard. And anytime he made money in beach volleyball, he was like, I feel like I'm stealing money from the world. Like I get to make money doing this. And so a lot of beach volleyball players, they look at a golf, they look at a tennis, and there's a lot of entitlement in it. And they're like, well, I should be making millions. And it's like, all right, well, go take a look at the US Open and tell me how many fans are watching that. Watch the finals of the Manhattan Beach Open. Like our stream for the Manhattan Beach Open got like 50,000 viewers, which for beach volleyball is a lot, but you know, that's like 500th of what golf and tennis get. And so what we need, I mean, we need a lot of things, but really we need to find a way to get a captive audience that a lot of these mainstream sports have. And you get it at the Olympics, and a lot of people will use that Olympic comparison because we'll get, 2 billion viewers on beach volleyball during the 2 weeks of the Olympics, and then we lose them. And it's like, all right, well, how can we retain some of that audience throughout the year? And the sport, I mean, it's just kind of fractured. Beach volleyball is one of the only sports that you can buy. And pickleball is kind of having a similar war right now where you look at the NFL, you look at the MLB, you look at the PGA Tour, the NHL, you name it, they're all nonprofits. You can't buy baseball and you can't buy football. And what that creates is that people want to help them out, because you help out the NFL, you're not really like helping anyone's bottom line, but you help out beach volleyball. It's like, well, this company called CVC Capital, they just bought the international tour. And it's like, well, if I'm making the FIVB money, that's not actually going to the players, that's going to CVC Capital, a hedge fund. And no one really wants to help out a hedge fund, And so it's a strange thing that you can literally buy the entire sport of beach volleyball. So there's just so many issues with it. It's such a beautiful game. And, I think that if people if playing beach volleyball was enough, I think that would probably go a long way, where there wouldn't be so much infighting and grabbing and, we need more of this and more of that. I think that the sport itself is enough, and people keep trying to change it and make things more exciting. And my buddy, Kent Steffes, who's the most dominant player of all time, he won more than half the tournaments he played and won the 96 gold medal. And he was saying that, yeah, we used to get pitched all the time that we should play in masks and capes because that'd be more entertaining. And Kent was like, it's ridiculous, but these are real ideas being pitched. And it's such a wonderful sport. And I think without, it's just been at a constant civil war really since 96. And it's tough for people to get attracted to a sport that's constantly in a civil war and fighting over itself. And that's so I don't want to be like, oh, we should all just come together, but I don't know. I mean, something sort of like that, because with so much infighting, it's just not really that attractive of a product.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take, because you don't hear that very often. And every sport, there's like this organizational hierarchy and stuff, but when this is the kind of, everyone's trying to, eat, and there's like this system where kind of like, it's a little messy. And that's why it's so cool what you're doing with your writing, what you're doing with your podcast, where you're bringing out, a lot of knowledge of the volleyball game. And that's why it's so much fun. And that's why this is so much fun to sit here and talk to you, because you have a wealth of knowledge and your life is fantastic. Like, even just sitting here and listening to you, you're like, oh, I was in Qatar, and I'm like, God damn, like, this is so cool to be like, okay, yeah, I've been like hundreds and hundreds of countries. You've done hundreds of things, and you've lived this life, and it's beautiful. And it's what makes, everything about you happy. It's what makes you the person you are. And it was honestly an honor to sit here and talk to you about this today on the podcast. So I'm like super psyched, and I really appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, man, I'm stoked that you had me on. And I mean, I look at my life, I'm a big fan of journaling, and pretty much every day I close my journal like, this is a ridiculous life that you get to live, man. Like, anytime I write, like, if I have a problem, I'm like, these aren't problems. And like, this is amazing. So I appreciate the opportunity for you having me on to chat about this amazing game and this cool life. And I hope that your listeners enjoy it, and hopefully they'll tune into beach volleyball and have a good time watching.
Absolutely. Well, this is fun. Travis, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, man. Have a great day.
You too.